Hey guys, TC Made with TC Gaming. I wanted to go ahead and get into video number 3 for you here. And I realized when I put this on a second ago that my microphone was turned way down. My audio was all over the place, and I ended up taking the video down because it was just total trash. And the good news is it's probably better for you guys because I jacked a couple things up in the middle there, and this will hopefully be better. What we're doing is we're picking up on the Exploring Action RPG series. We're into video number 3 right now. Video number 2 was kind of like a little intermediate, maybe more like a 1.5 video, where I did a little bit about talking about some things that I had changed and discovered along the way. I'm going to start this video out with a similar thing. One of the users from the video had a comment about the floor for the dungeon that we're using. So in the previous videos, we had talked about some of the additional assets we're going to use during this investigation into the Action RPG series. And the asset's called the Medieval Dungeon. And I'd also downloaded the craft resource icon. So you want to go and get those in the marketplace. Check my previous video to find out what the links are for them. If you go to the Medieval Dungeon, one of the issues was that the floor tiles in here do not have collision mesh on them. So what I was going to show you is how to fix those very quickly. And if you go into the dungeon and click on any one of these tiles, you can see it's highlighting it over here. And you can also do that, same thing by just clicking on these. And if you right click on one of those, go to Browse to Asset. It's going to pull it up in your Content Explorer. You'll notice in here that in that dungeon, it's the only floor tile that's in this whole thing. All the floors that you see are actually these planes that have a texture object, or a material rather, rendered over top of them. And so they end up becoming pretty fast to lay down. But they didn't put the collision on, or when the package was brought into UE, it may not have gotten picked up. So to fix this, we can right click on it and go to Edit, or we can also just double left click on that floor and it'll bring you into the asset browser for that, or the asset editor. And when we get in here, we just want to go to this collision drawing options and show simple collision and complex collision. Now you'll see here, we don't even see the object, we just see the collision plane for this. And what's happening here, as I said earlier, this is just kind of like a little plane that's out there, but it has a material on it for brick floor that's being painted on this, and the size of that and the textures and everything just line up that it makes it look like a floor as it's being laid down. Well, when you get things like this, sometimes you may not see one of these collisions. Now, in my case, I have both because I've already gone through and corrected this, but one of the ways to fix the collision is to go over here to collision, and if you have a collision on it, you can remove it or whatever, but you can say, clean that up and then add, other collisions to it, like auto collisions, or adding capsules or boxes or spheres. Depending on the shape of your object, though, that may not work out the best. And I've had several things where I have some very angular polygon type resource things that I'm trying to put a collision on, and it just doesn't line up the way I want it to. So what the other choice is if you go over here into the details panel and you go down into the collision properties, there's a thing down here for collision complexity, where you can say use complex collision as simple. And if you flip that on, especially in the case of something like this where it's a small thing that's being used over and over and over again, probably not that big of a deal. This doesn't have a lot of polygons to it. It's like basically one surface, two surfaces, or whatever, a couple corners. You don't have to worry about that as much, I don't think. But if you have something that's very complex and you put this on, you will see a little performance dip if you have a lot of these things happening, because basically what this does is it renders your object twice. Once for the view of the object, and then the second time it's on there as the thing for collision. Okay? So you don't want to do this with something that's very complex. But if you flip that on there and then hit save, that should fix your floor issue. Okay? Now, one of the other things we wanted to talk about is in the previous video, or the first video, we were talking about changing some of these montages. And one of the things I found out is if you play the game long enough, you get this little magical torch that pops out. I think it's under the item weapon pickups maybe. So this torch, if we go to the viewport, this thing gets spawned as a magical or a magical weapon at the end of so many kills or whatever. And so what you want to do with this is you want to go in, there's a folder here where this lives called assets. And one of the things that you need to change is if you go into the GA weapon pickup, remember GAs are for gameplay abilities. You want to double left click on here and go to the montage to play, and you want to switch this montage to be the one that's on your GS character if you're following along with me, or whatever your character animation is that replaces this for your attack. This blueprint for the GA happens to be in a different spot than most of the other GAs. It's actually with the item, and maybe that's a best practice. I would guess you put them all together, whereas the other ones are character-based skills type of thing. So we wanted to fix that, and again, you just simply go in there and change the montage associated with it. The other thing we did, or we want to do, is if you go into the game instance for here, and into, let's see, the game instance, and then there's also the BP game mode. BP game mode, and I think there was a controller, which is going to be in, I want to open these up all together. In the blueprint section, you have, what were the ones I already had open? I've got BP game mode and game instance, and then there should also be the player controller is in here. And then you also have the player character. So the reason we want to get into this is kind of, we can look around at all the different things that are driving the game. 90% of what you're looking for is going to be found in one of these 4 blueprints in most cases, other than item-specific things like we talked about a second ago. But as far as influence gameplay behavior, you know, if there's something that affects the character as far as a control or, you know, anything like that, that's where you're going to take control of it in here. And if we go to the BP game mode, this is where your game is calling the logic for starting the enemy spawns and also for starting the waves and increasing the kill counters and all that kind of stuff's going on in here. So I would encourage you to open these up and kind of look through. The way that they have this laid out is pretty straightforward. So if you look this up, you go start new wave. Okay, what are they doing here? Well, let's kind of look at a little bit of it. We go and we get a data table row from the waves progression. So starting a wave, waves progression, data table row. And the file's called waves progression. And if you hover over this, you can see that it lives in data table, game blueprints, progression, waves progression. So data table, game blueprints, progression, waves progression. We minimize this out. We've got our data tables under our session here. Let's see, go back to here, and it should be right in there. Assets, maybe? Blueprints, progression, and there's a waves progression in here. Let's go back to that. So waves progression, and in that waves progression, if you open this up, this was the thing I showed you last time, that there's, you know, a couple of waves in here. I've got 3 of them in mine right now. And the way the game logic is set up is, you know, wave number 1 consists of these enemies. So wave number 1, you're going to have 3 different spawns that jump out. Right? 0, 1, and 2 is 3 things. And the first thing you're going to get is an NPC goblin level 1. Then you're going to get 2 level 1 goblins. Then you're going to get 2 more level 1 goblins. And they give you 60 seconds on your wave timer. Okay? You can change all the gameplay effects here, or gameplay behavior, I should say. And same thing here, when you go to your second spawn, they increase the difficulty a little bit. Now you get 2 of these guys right away. Then you get a level 2 guy and a level 1 guy. And we go to the next one, you do 2 more level 2s and a level 1. And, you know, then you get to level 3. And I put level 3 in here, I think, when we were talking about it in the other video. But basically, you got 2 decent difficulty goblins and an NPC spider boss, which you really can't see how great that NPC spider boss is in that little cave. He doesn't really do much in there. But if you get him out in the bigger level, I assure you he can become quite aggressive. So, you know, we want to go in there and take a look at how that's set up for our waves. And again, it's going to go in there and get the data table row for the waves progression. Well, where it gets the value is from something called current wave. And current wave is an integer variable. which means it's a 0, 1, 2, 3. It's a whole number, right? So an integer gets stored in here, and by default, when this starts up, current wave's default is 1. So it starts out and it goes, go and get current wave 1 from that table, and it's going to append. See that little append wave underscore and then 1. So if we go back to this table, these names will be wave underscore 1, wave underscore 2, wave underscore 3. So when you make yours, you just call it wave whatever, and that thing will automatically go and load the next available wave, and you don't have to do anything other than that. Just name it the right way. And this little chunk of code right in there that we just looked at manages how that thing gets called. So we close this out. Again, just looking at that logic, wave underscore and whatever the current wave is. So it'll be wave underscore 1, 2, 3. That way you can put as many waves as you want to in there. This code will always work against that as long as you follow the proper naming convention. It's important to understand that. We go from there after we get that data table row. We go out here and we break that down to find out what is the wave time associated with it and what is the spawn group that's in that wave. And then we go and we set the battle time, we set the wave, and we spawn that new wave and pass this information over to it. Spawn new wave comes down here, creates a WB wave start widget, which flashes, level 1 or wave 1 starting, and adds it to the viewport, gives it a little bit of delay, and then spawns the enemy group, right? And then when we're done, it just keeps updating the timer as we're playing. And when we're done, we get a wave finished, and it'll do on to the next wave. Right? Checks the current wave, comes up here and says start new wave, goes out and gets wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, so on and so forth, and just keeps passing the logic back and forth through this. When it hits the end of the data table, when there is no more wave anything, so you have this thing called row not found. So if it can't find a wave underscore whatever your counter is, it says, oh, I don't have any more waves, and instead of crashing and burning, what it does, it goes to a function called on all waves finished. And on all waves finished, we just simply print the string and go cast to the BP game instance over here. And we call a function that's over there called load game level. On all waves finished, we're going to go load a game level out of the game instance. So in the game instance, where we load that level, go back in here, I'll show you. Double left click this, it'll take you in there. Load game level in the game instance. Goes in here and fades in and shows the loading screen. And then it goes over here, and this is our level logic that we put in. Where I said, okay, well, I've got a little list of levels here. We're going to eventually turn this into a data table, I believe. And go and get the index for this. Well, this level index starts at 0. So when you come in here, you fade in, and you look up this condition down here for the selection of the map name, and it says, okay, well, if it doesn't match the word endgame, then we want to go and open up whatever that level is. And it comes back and gets that same name here and here. So it uses here to compare it to the end game. And if it's not the end game, then it passes it on over here as the level name. So if I want to put multiple levels, then I just hit add pin and add a level, add pin, add a level, so on and so forth. Or I could come up with a similar convention as what they have on the other one that says go and look for, and I may do that, go look for maps. Like map underscore 1, map underscore 2, map underscore 3. And if you get to the point where you can't find whatever the next map is supposed to be, oh, guess what? You're out of levels, and then take you onto the thing. So I'll do this. I might do the same exact thing with that. Set up a data table, a couple of other parameters in there, and then pass some code that pulls this up so I could literally just go in and drop in another map at any given point in time without touching any of this other, adding pins here type of thing. So that takes care of that, and then it goes out and it says if that's not the end game, then open that level, increment the counter, and then go back over there and start the game, which toggles back over here. It resets everything, and we go into the level. Okay, so that's kind of how that's working. But what I wanted to do in here is I wanted to shut the timer off for now, because I'm not interested in having the time countdown on me while I'm trying to just run through and check out my levels and everything. So we have to find the spot in here where it says start timer, which is right here in the BP game mode. Show remaining player time. So if we just shut the player off here, right, this doesn't get called. And as a result, it's just going to stay with the default level counter number that's passed to it in that other block that says how many seconds do you have for that level. So our screen's going to remain static with that information on it. Now, the other thing is, we had just talked about a second ago, to play the beginning of the game level with the little fade to black and play game level thing, which was, I think, in this little block right down here. Open level, whoops, open level. I just pulled it up a second ago. It might be in one of these. If I don't find it here real quick, just rewind the video back a couple seconds to look at it. It's in there. It's not really important. It's not the reason I'm trying to tell you something here. What it does, though, is it grabs, if there's a cutscene in here, then it'll play it. And again, we're shutting this timer off, and we want to go and still follow the other logic, though. So on the event begin play, it plays the default intro cutscene. So when we load up our next level, we're going to do the same thing. And the other day when I played it, this kind of staggered a little bit because I had a pretty heavy amount of objects being loaded in. So we want to play a default cutscene. We don't have one for that one, so we're going to build one. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. And then this just goes up here to this play default cutscene, gets all the actors that are level sequences, plays them, and whenever we're done, we start the game. Starting the game comes down here and initializes everything and starts this enemy spawn, which is up here, which plays down until we get to a new wave. The new wave gets done, and when all waves are finished, the game's over. If they're not done, we spawn another wave. Spawn a new wave, update our timer, spawn next enemy group, so on and so forth. If there isn't one in there, you'll eventually get to the point where you're going to hit that end game loop and go out. Okay? Excuse me. So the other thing we wanted to look at, we're going to throw these out here. In our level in here, our creatures were standing still and they weren't attacking us. And the reason for that is because they don't have a Navmesh bounds volume. Now to find that, what you do is you go over to your place actors section and just type in the word nav and look for something called Navmesh bounds volume. And what that is, basically, it's the box that you place around the floors in your level to allow your creatures and characters to know where they can navigate to. If you click in your level and hit the P key, it'll show you where your Navmesh bounds volumes are. Now in this one, excuse me, I've already painted this in here for you, and I'm going to show you how an easier way to do that is. So you drag your thing over here, but first you go and look for zoom out. So I'm going to zoom out. And I talked about this in the other video, but if I roll my mouse wheel in, it slows down how fast I zoom out. And if I push my mouse wheel away from me, it speeds it up. So I want to kind of zoom out here over top of this level. And once I got out here, then I would just drag out my Navmesh bounds volume and I'd just drop it off around the center of this. And then we can click this onto the select and scale objects function and move it out to create a larger box. So we would start kind of in the center and spread out in both directions to get this where we wanted to. And then we do the same thing basically by going down here and going to the next axis. Pull this down a little bit. Going down to the next axis and pulling this up and down using the same box. So you can see as I do this, it's going to rebuild navigation, but that's how you could go in here and change the size of these boxes and everything for your nav mesh. And then again, when you're done with it, you just hit the P key and it should show you where you have nav mesh bounds all over your level. And that'll allow your AI to talk. Excuse me. I had said earlier, you had a default scene intro player. Keep that there. And your default scene intro player, in my case, I have one in here called Dungeon Intro. So I created this one, and what happens now is when we load into this level, it'll look like this. We hit F11 and Alt P. So our camera comes up through the door, comes out, makes a hard left, pans over, and zooms in on whatever the object is and kind of pans out a little bit and says, okay, we're ready to play. Okay? Then it's going to spawn the wave, and now that these guys can move, they'll come out and they'll attack us. We turn this volume down some. So you'll see that they come over and they start trying to, they can actually follow us around the level now, which means that we have to actually play. And if we don't, they'll come and get us. Okay? If they're not following you around, one of two things has happened. One is either they're too low into the mesh and their feet are like stuck to the ground, or number two is that they don't have the Navmesh bounds volume on. But see, these guys, they should be. I was just using it to check them, see if they can come down the steps. They can. They can come around here into pretty much any area of this this dungeon now. Unfortunately. Okay, but they can walk in here anywhere because I put the Navmesh bounds volume up high enough. Now, I don't think the guys from level 3 will come down here, but maybe they will. Let's see, they spawned up there. You see those two little red down arrows? All right, here they come. So now, maybe they heard me, you know, because of the radiuses and stuff. So, like I said, with just a little bit of work with this thing, like minor types of stuff, you could really build a very quick kind of hack and slash type game and get it up and running pretty fast if you just understand some basic concepts about these gameplay abilities and effects and how to make items and all that kind of stuff and tweak a little bit. And we'll go through some of this. I'm going to show you very quick how to build the intro scene. Let me just beat these guys here real quick. Just to satisfy the viewers at home, I'm doing this for you guys. I know you want me to beat this spider. If I just quit before the spider was dead, everybody'd be, you know, I'd hear about it in the comments. So there we are. We've done that. Now we would spawn onto our next level, and in this case, it happens to be the same room without a table. And we're going to go see our default intro again. Right? Pulls it up. Same exact thing. And then it's going to start to play the next one. Now this one doesn't have the table. Or maybe the other one didn't have the table, but we're definitely in a different, should be in a different level there. So, how do we make, I'm going to hit this P key again to turn that off. How do we make a level intro? Well, what I did is I went into the sequences, and there was one called SQ main menu. And if you look into the intro side, there's also all the different little intro masters and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this one and say duplicate. And I'm going to get another file here. And I'll just call this Dungeon Intro 2. We'll do a new one. And what I do is I take, since it's a duplicate, if I were to pull this up, it's going to have the same frames in it as the other one did. But the problem is it's based on wherever that camera was for the other one. And in this case, the camera's like sitting out on top of the building or whatever, so it's really not going to be that great to use that. So what I do is I go in here, and since this is a different one, I can go in here and delete the shots from this. And I zero out the camera. Back to 0 here. And I'm going to just save that for a second. Now, let's just hit play, on here rather, and see if what's going to happen here. All right, if we had this turned up, we'd hear some noises. You hear that? So that's from the other video left over. And I'm just going to leave them in there because it doesn't really matter much about that for the sound. But what we want to do is we want to go and create a new, let me back this out. We want to go back and create a new camera to follow around in the level to create our new scene. So we're going to go in here and say, there should be a thing in here for camera right here. Create a new camera and set it as the current camera cut. So we're going to do that, and it puts a new camera in our level. And what we want to do is kind of back up to some place where, and I'm driving the camera around just like I would with anything else, WASD and the mouse button. Okay. So this one, let me minimize it. Well, actually, I need to keep this kind of up here, but you'll see why in a sec. So if I get this where I want it, let's say I want to start, like down low like this to the ground, and I'm gonna, come up and go down the hallway, and we'll pan out and look at this statue out here. So I got my camera where I want it, and I want to go down through here. I'm going to minimize these little sub scenes and all that, but here's my Cine camera actor. In this case, it's called 42. And all we want to do is get the transform of the camera, and there's this little plus button that says add a new key at the current time. So I'm at 0 with my timeline here, basically 0-ish. And I want to start here. So I take my transform and I hit a keyframe, and you'll see this little dot pop on here. These are all individual frames for timing and stuff. So if you put this out further, 2 or 3 frames, frame sections, it'll take longer for the video to transition to whatever that thing is. The closer it is, the faster it'll go. So I could do a lot of things with this, but I'm just gonna put it like 2 of them out. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click in the level holding my right mouse key. I'm going to hit the page up button, and I got my sensitivity turned down by rolling the mouse wheel towards me while I'm holding the right mouse key. So I got my sensitivity turned down. I'm going to pull the camera up like this, and I'm going to drive it out into the level, like here-ish. And once I get it to where I want it, I'm going to hit this keyframe again on the transform section. I got 2 dots now. I'm going to move this over like maybe a frame and a half. I'm going to take the camera and pan it over and back it up a little bit. And I'm going to do another keyframe on the transform. I'm going to move it all the way up to about right there. And same thing, I'm going to go maybe pan this back here, get that up in the air, and just hit transform keyframe again. So now we can see our camera path here. And I'm going to save this. And then if I take this little scrub bar, I can scrub through here into watch my camera play. So if I go through this, I'm going to rise up. I just rise up to that position, look over to the character, and then pan back. That's my new cutscene. If I hit play, it'll show you the speed at which all that's going to happen. Okay. All right. So there's your setup for that. And now what we want to do to render this is under Cine Camera Actor 42, which will be out here. Cinema Camera Actor 42. I'll set this back up to my 0 frame. Don't know if that matters or not, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click on this actor, and I'm going to say record Cine Camera Actor 42 in sequencer. Just go and hit play and just let it go. It's going to go make my camera moves. When it gets to the end of the sequence, it's going to stop. Okay, and then it's going to basically render that as a shot somewhere. It should say recorded sequence _1. Let me pull this back out, and let me minimize. Now I have a dungeon intro 2, and that sequence should be in there. So if I save all these, let's take our dungeon intro 2 and use it to replace our dungeon intro 1. Dungeon intro, or dungeon level sequence actor, I guess. Pull that. Where'd it go? There's always something hidden in a wall. Okay, so there's that actor. And I'm just going to delete it from our level. And I'll take Dungeon Intro 2 and just put it out here in its place. Hit save, and when we hit play, there's our new loading screen. fades to black, spawns characters. Okay. And, if I want to change it back to the other one, I just drag dungeon intro in there. Either one's going to be fine. But ideally now what will happen is when we play through the level, that'll create that little thing. And again, that's being called through because of the blueprint code. It just looks for anything that is a level transition sequence thing. To get started, you could take the default one for SQL Intro Master, or SQ Intro Master rather, and just dump those in there. And you'll get a similar result. It's just the camera's not in the right spot, so you'll have to go through and tweak how that thing's set up. Okay, so I want to get you a couple of these things tonight to make sure that you got all that in there. So disable your timer, fix your floor, put your animation montage sequence on the torch for the thing I showed you earlier, and also try and set up a transition video for the beginning of your level. And we're going to do that for each of our levels so that we have a little bit smoother transition. And if we go back to the first one, I'll play through these and we should hopefully get here and see that level transition take place now. So let's go back to our first map, and we'll go to Action RPG. And then I'm done here for the night after I get done playing this video. Hopefully this will get you guys some stuff to go through between now and the next one. Close that. I'm going to hit F11 on mine, and I'm going to hit Alt-P, and we'll just watch the game. A little volume here. Those guys look so mad. They have a horrible dental plan. Alright, here we go. And also on this one, I don't know if I talked about this before, but if you hold down the control key on this game, it actually increases your speed to run. So sometimes you might want to do that in here. So here's what your R key looks like. See how you move pretty fast. Try and speed run through here so we can get to our level cutscene. Plus I enjoy killing these guys at the end of a long day. Okay. One more wave. If we survive, we get to go to the next level. I find that with a lot of these guys, if you can just run right to them and be aggressive, that you got a better chance of surviving. For example, this guy. If you walk around real slow, that guy's not going to let you do it. But you can see my timer's not counting down in here, right? That's better. It'll keep going up in most cases. Okay, levels are done. Waves are done. I should go to the next level with a nice smooth intro. Let's see. There you go. Looking good. Looking good. Alright guys, my name's TC Made with TC Gaming. Hopefully you learned a little something here tonight that helps you in one of your future game projects or with the Action RPG Kit. And again, the reason we're using the Action RPG Kit is because this is the preferred methodology according to Unreal and Epic Engine Unreal. This is how they build Fortnite. They use the gameplay ability system, the gameplay effects system, and some other logic, obviously. But this is the closest they could get to giving you the trade secrets on how Fortnite's built without actually giving you Fortnite. So, again, my name is TC Mabe, TC Gaming. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in an upcoming live stream.